Welcome to the Deep Dive, your shortcut to being truly well-informed. Today, we're plunging into something, well, huge. A major development shaking up higher education. Columbia University has just agreed to a landmark settlement with the Trump administration.
That's right. A really big deal. We're going to break down this agreement. It resolves several federal civil rights investigations, and maybe more importantly, it restores a lot of research funding. The implications here? They go way beyond just Columbia. Could affect many top universities.
Definitely. And to get our heads around this, we've looked at reporting from the New York Times, Politico, the New York Post, Fox News, all published just yesterday, July 23rd, 2025. So our mission today, unpack this thing. How did we even get here? What's in the settlement exactly? And yeah, what does it all mean for Columbia, other schools, academic freedom, federal power? Stick around. There's some surprising links here.
Okay, so let's rewind a bit. How did this start? The core issue, really, was allegations that Columbia wasn't protecting Jewish students from harassment.
Right, and those tensions really blew up after the October 7th, 2023 Hamas attack on Israel. That sparked some incredibly divisive protests on campus, didn't it? Made national news.
Yeah, absolutely did. And then, fast forward to March 2025, the Trump administration took this, well, extraordinary step. They canceled or froze over $400 million in federal research grants to Columbia.
400 million. That's not just a warning shot, is it?
No, not at all. And what's really interesting is Columbia was the first university they did this to. Others like Harvard, Cornell, Northwestern, they followed later. But the financial hit for Columbia just kept growing.
How so?
Well, the National Institutes of Health, the NIH, huge funder for medical research, they basically froze almost all funding going to Columbia, even reimbursements for grants that were already running.
Wow, even octave grants.
Exactly. There's a group, Grant Watch, run by researchers. They estimated about $1.2 billion in unspent NIH money was either cut off or frozen. And it wasn't just NIH. The National Science Foundation, other agencies, they pulled grants too.
Okay, so let's get this straight. Columbia gets around $1.3 billion in federal research money annually. And they said basically all of that could have gone if they stayed on this White House blacklist.
That's what they stated, yes. It became an urgent matter, as they put it. You're talking about potentially wiping out decades of research work. They said it brought them to a tipping point for their research reputation.
Even with their massive endowment, over $14 billion, right? That frozen funding still really tied their hands on research.
Absolutely. It really shows you how much even the wealthiest universities rely on that federal research pipeline. It wasn't just about the money itself. It was about keeping the lights on for major scientific projects, keeping top researchers. The potential damage was enormous.
Right. So that brings us to the settlement, the deal itself. What did Columbia actually agree to pay?
Okay, the numbers are pretty big. There's a $200 million fine to the federal government. That's payable over 3 years.
$200 million.
Okay. And on top of that, another $21 million to settle separate investigations by the EEOC, that's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Those were about alleged anti-Semitic discrimination against Jewish faculty members.
So adding that up, that's over $220 million total.
Correct. Over $220 million.
Oh, huge price tag. What do they get back for that besides getting off the blacklist?
Well, the main thing is that most of that terminated or frozen research funding gets restored. And crucially, they can compete for new federal grants again on an equal footing.
Okay, so the research engine can restart.
Pretty much. Now, another key part of this deal is an independent monitor, a guy named Bart M. Schwartz. He's got a background as a former federal prosecutor, co-founded Guidepost Solutions. He'll oversee things for 3 years, reporting back to the government every 6 months.
An independent monitor. And who pays for that?
Columbia does. They cover the cost of the monitor.
Got it. And like a lot of these settlements, Columbia isn't admitting they did anything wrong, legally speaking.
Right. That's standard language. The agreement says it's to avoid the cost and hassle of litigation, not an admission of wrongdoing.
Okay, standard clause, but does it really change the message this sends? I mean, Columbia's acting president, Claire Shipman, she said the deal was carefully crafted to protect their values, safeguard their independence, things like hiring, admissions, academic speech.
That's the official line, yeah.
Yeah.
And the agreement does say the government can't dictate hiring or admissions or what's taught, but, well, you have to look at the specific policy changes they did agree to.
Ah, okay, the fine print.
Exactly. And a lot of these changes echo demands from a Trump anti-Semitism task force, for instance, on anti-Semitism and campus unrest. They're appointing a senior vice provost to oversee the Middle Eastern Studies Department.
Oversee it.
Yeah, and other related departments, too, like the Center for Palestine Studies, the Institute for Israel and Jewish Studies. The goal stated is to make sure their programs are comprehensive and balanced.
Hmm. A senior administrator ensuring academic programs are balanced. That sounds potentially intrusive, doesn't it? I mean, what does that actually mean for academic freedom there? And could other universities face similar oversight?
It's a huge question and definitely sets a precedent people are watching. Beyond that specific department oversight, they're also keeping restrictions on protests. There's a ban on mask protests, though face coverings for medical or religious reasons are still okay.
Okay.
They'll also work with the NYPD to make sure something like the Hamilton Hall takeover doesn't happen again. And interestingly, disciplinary rules. They're moving out of the Faculty Senate's hands and under the office of the provost.
Big shift in governance.
It is. Plus, they're hiring about 36 new public safety officers who will have arrest powers. And, this is significant, they've agreed to adopt the IHRA definition of antisemitism, the International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance definition.
Wow. Okay, that's a lot on campus climate and conduct. What about other hot-button areas like admissions, hiring, GEI programs?
Right. So on that front, Columbia pledged to follow laws that ban considering race in admissions and hiring. This lines up with the Supreme Court's decision from 2023.
Meaning no using personal essays or diversity statements to kind of get around that.
That seems to be the implication, yes. Not using those things as a way to, quote, introduce discrimination. They also agreed not to maintain programs that promote unlawful efforts regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion.
Vague wording there, unlawful efforts.
It is a bit vague. And they have to share admissions data with that independent monitor, Bart Schwartz, to show they're complying. They also agreed to end any programs found to discriminate against faculty or students, and, interestingly, to create new faculty positions specifically to broaden intellectual diversity.
So many changes. If you had to pick one, what seems like the biggest single shift for how Columbia operates day to day?
That's tough. But I'd probably say the combination of that direct oversight for Middle Eastern studies and the monitor getting access to admissions data, that level of outside scrutiny over core academic functions, that's pretty new territory for a place like Columbia.
Yeah, that feels different.
And speaking of students, the deal also covers international students and foreign funding, another area that's been getting a lot of attention lately.
Right. I'm guessing more vetting, more transparency.
Exactly. Columbia now has to notify the Department of Homeland Security if an international student is arrested, not just suspended or expelled, but arrested.
Wow.
They also have to follow laws on disclosing foreign funding much more strictly, and they're stepping up vetting for foreign applicants, asking them more questions about why they want to study in the U.S. and sharing that data with the federal government.
Sharing applicant data with the feds.
Yes. And the reporting suggests Columbia will actually cut back on how much it relies on international student enrollment. Plus, there's a provision for experts to consult with the university to prevent terrorist financing or other illicit money coming in.
This whole piece on international students, questioning applicants, sharing data with DHS, cutting back enrollment, that seems like a radical change for a global university like Columbia. Could that really affect who applies, who comes?
It absolutely could. It forces them to rethink their whole global recruitment strategy, balancing that openness they're known for with these new security and reporting demands. It's a major shift. And there was one more area mentioned in the sources, Title IX and sports.
Title IX, the law about sex discrimination in education programs getting federal funds. What's the detail there?
The agreement says Columbia have to comply with Title IX, and the sources specify this means the school won't force women to compete against biological men in sports or share locker rooms, housing, or other facilities with them.
Okay, another policy area aligned with the administration's priorities.
Seems that way, yes. It touches on another major ongoing debate in higher education and beyond.
Okay, so we've walked through the fines, the monitor, the massive list of policy changes. This is incredibly comprehensive. So, stepping back, what's the big picture here? What does this mean for Columbia and maybe for other universities watching this unfold?
Well, from Columbia's side, acting President Shipman basically said they chose to settle rather than fight it out in court, which is the path Harvard took, remember. She argued it was the right decision for Columbia to save its research programs. They were worried about losing top scientists, losing their status as a top research university.
A pragmatic decision, then, from their perspective. Protect the core research mission, even at this cost.
That seems to be the rationale. But the administration, of course, sees it very differently. Education Secretary Linda McMahon called the deal a seismic shift. She said it holds institutions accountable for antisemitism and called it a roadmap for elite universities.
A roadmap. So the administration clearly thinks this is a blueprint for others. Is that realistic, though? Or was Colombia maybe uniquely vulnerable because of the scale of the funding freeze?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? McMahon definitely framed it as something that will ripple across the higher education sector and change campus culture. But yeah, whether other universities will face the same pressure or have the same incentives to settle, we'll have to see. It might depend heavily on their specific reliance on federal funds and their individual circumstances.
Still, even if it's not an exact roadmap, the message is pretty clear. And the reactions,
Yeah.
they're all over the place, right?
Oh, absolutely. Sharply divided. You have folks like Michael Thaddeus. He's a math professor at Columbia and acting president of the faculty union chapter there. He's really concerned. He said the deal opens the door to government interference in academics, pointing specifically to the monitor looking at admissions data and the oversight of Middle Eastern studies. Big concerns about academic independence.
Okay, so pushback from some faculty.
Right. But then you have others, like Brian Cohen, who runs Hillel, the Jewish student organization at Columbia. He welcomed the deal, called it an important recognition of the anti-Semitism Jewish students have been experiencing. He's hopeful it leads to real, sustained change.
So relief and hope from some students and advocates.
Exactly. And this feeds into that bigger debate we touched on. Is the administration weaponizing research funding, using that financial leverage to force changes on campus culture and speech issues that are, technically separate from the research itself?
The ends justifying the means, perhaps, from their perspective.
Possibly. It really highlights the power dynamics. And it's also worth noting that Columbia's public statement about the deal doesn't quite match everything the White House claimed was in it.
Oh, like what?
Well, Columbia's statement didn't seem to acknowledge things like a mandated review of Middle East programs, or those new data sharing requirements for international applicants, or the specific points about women's sports. So, it's important for you, the listener, to know that the sources show slightly different spins on the details from each side.
Interesting. Both sides trying to frame the narrative even after the deal is signed.
Pretty typical in these high-stakes situations.
Okay, so let's try to sum up this deep dive. We've got Colombia paying a hefty price, over $220 million. They've agreed to a really wide range of policy changes, from protest rules and DEI to academic oversight and international student vetting. There's an independent monitor keeping watch for 3 years. And all this is happening against the backdrop of this huge debate about federal power versus university independence.
That's a good summary. And it leaves us with some big questions moving forward. This deal between Colombia and the Trump administration, is it just a one-off? Or is it truly a blueprint, a precedent for how government might interact with universities in the future?
Right. What does it mean for how universities handle free speech, civil rights, and especially that crucial link to federal research funding, all while under this increasing spotlight?
Exactly. It's definitely something to keep thinking about, especially as other universities might find themselves in similar situations. This story is far from over.